Hello and welcome to another CAD Swift feature release video. In this episode we're going to go through our latest updates to Infinite Openings, our door and window tool for Raked. As you can see on the screen, we've been working on some pretty fancy improvements. So we'll have a look at the list because there's a few things, and then I'll break this video up into chapters. So if you have a look down along the bar, the progress bar, you'll see the individual chapters for all the different updates, so you can sort of skip to the ones that are relevant to you. Okay, let's first have a look at the list. A lot of you will be happy to know that I've started to implement build dates into the description of the object, so you can actually go into the object and have a look at the build date of your element. We've got several updates in there to go through. They're quite interesting, so I think you'll enjoy this video. There's some pretty cool things to show, so let's get into it. The first update we're going to look at is probably the one that's most obvious, the raked and arched heads for the individual panels. We now have 3 new hotspots at the top of each panel, so if you have a look at these panels here as well, they've got the 3 hotspots on them. The middle one obviously is for the arch, so we can reduce that arch back down, and then on either side you have a positioning, so this is just an offset from the original height, and that's individual for each side. So you can rake this element, or you can use the middle hotspot to add an arch to it. The resolution of this element is controlled in model view options, so that's quite convenient. So you can see it's sort of segmented here. We can go into model view options and we can bump this resolution up, and that will improve the appearance of the element. This allows you to do elements such as this, and I'll just demonstrate how this is achieved. Okay, so here we're starting with a regular rectangular window. We can rake the head of this element by setting it to a polygon. As you can see, we've already got the arch value in here, so I'll just remove that for now. Then we can grab the nodes on the side and we can rake our element. With the overall element raked, we then can add rakes to the individual panels. However, when creating elements like this, you obviously need to be aware of the laws of construction that will actually allow this element to operate. Obviously this sliding panel will not be able to fit into the reducing frame. So now let's get a little bit more fancy and add an arch. Set these to their closed position. And that is how we create raked and arched operable panels in Infinite Openings. Okay, let's look at the next function. We recently created a new vertical folding door element, which we have applied here. Let's have a closer look. In the operable elements menu, we can now access a vertical folding door. This element gives us the same values as the typical folding doors. So we have left and right panels. In this case, left is lower and right is upper. And we can set different widths to these panels, which is what I have set here. So if I just uncheck that box and put in a few more panels, you can see a more typical element. We do also have the ability to put lower panels in. However, I don't imagine this will be used too much for this sort of element. at least not in that configuration. So that is vertical folding doors. It has all the typical functions, panel styles that you'd expect in every other operable element. Okay, the next element, very similar, we now have a multi-hung window. So we previously had single hung and double hung and asymmetrical versions of both in the tool. However, that still doesn't cover all configurations, so we need to put in the multi-hung. So we've just taken our sliding door, our multi-sliding door, and rotated it 90 degrees, as we did with the vertical folding, was just our folding door rotated 90 degrees. So all the same functions, all the same styles that you'd expect in every element. Let's have a closer look. So this is our window multi-hung, and as before you have left and right panels. However, in this it's lower and upper, and you can set different widths and different styles. Here I have applied probably what is the most typical style and what was not covered by the double hung and single hung windows. This element, however, is a lot more flexible, being a multi-panel element. You can set the number of panels on either side, and you can nominate them to be fixed at the start. So by putting one panel at the lower element and setting that fixed, that is how we have achieved the fixed panel below this sliding element in the same plane as the fixed panel above. Two of the other updates are also operable element types, but they're actually to incorporate beams and pillars into the configuration. So as you can see, I've got this sort of cross element here that is made up of a thin panel at the moment. I haven't really set the thickness to that. I can set a thickness and positioning of that element. And this is basically how we've achieved beam and pillar configurations in the tool. So let's have a closer look. In here, I've selected the beam element. If we scroll right down to the bottom, we have our pillar and our beam. So I've selected this beam element. What that does is it applies a panel to that element and cuts the frame in the way a beam would typically cut the frame. So let's have a look at that element. So you can see it's cutting this mullion here, and it's also cutting the frame on the edge there. Now that element is actually using the panel macro, so I can use all the functions of the panel macro within this. Click on this icon and go to its settings. So we can see that it's set to plane, but I can change that to a glazed element as well. So I've also applied that same element across here, and in this element I've applied the pillar. So here we can see we've got another beam. It's quite difficult to see, and I've expanded this UI to do that. This is only a 350mm space, so in the user interface it shows quite small. So I've used this function here to adjust the size of this element so I can see it enough to edit it. Okay, so I've set a beam here, and I've actually stretched that element across multiple panels using the set start and set end commands, which allow me to, let me just select the right element, which allow me to choose how far that element stretches across the unit. And that is the exact same function that I have used when creating the pillar. So if we go have a look at this pillar element, scroll down, you can see I've applied the pillar, and you can see that I've also stretched it to encompass the entire height of the unit. Have a look at that in 3D. And you see it cuts the top frame, it cuts the transom frames, and it cuts the bottom frame. But it does not cut the mullions on either side. So that is the logic of these two elements, and just like the beam is a door panel, so is the pillar. So I can go into the pillar's panel settings, and I can also make it a glazed element. Or I could make it contoured. Okay, so that covers the new operable element types and those functions that we've incorporated into the tool. So let's now look at a completely new aspect of it, and that is the insect screens. So if you go back to our components page, this is also one of the new aspects which I haven't explained yet. I will explain this aspect later. It is covered in another video. I'll put a link to it. Let me see, about there. So there'll be a link to that which actually goes into detail on this new page that we've created, but basically it's a way to very easily access all the components available within the tool. So basically every function, every page within the tool from this one page. And it arranges it into a logical order so that it's easy to navigate. So what we want to do now is we want to navigate to our fixtures and down to our latest fixture, the insect screen. Let's just go to the page for this element. So the first thing is you nominate where the screen is positioned relative to the element. So is it internal or external? Is it on the frame edge or inside the frame, or is it on the wall? So we're going to do an external frame edge. So that'll set it inside the frame. So the frame will be on the outside and it'll be inside. I'm then going to apply my frame elements. So we don't have to turn on all frame elements. Often in a door scenario we wouldn't have the bottom frame on if it was a vertical screen. In fact, often in Windows we don't have the bottom element on either. But this element allows you to turn off side and top elements as well, so you can individually nominate what elements are on. Obviously we have our size settings for everything as well. Other than that, we have the movement type. So you can do a fixed screen, obviously. The screen can be retracting to the left or the right, and to the top and the bottom, or it can be a double screen that retracts horizontally to the center or vertically to the center. In this one, we'll demonstrate the horizontal to center. The texture is obviously not available for the material that I've set to this. That's why we're getting that hatch. As you can see, it's set a frame inside our other frame. So you need to make sure the frame sizing is compatible with everything that's happening in there. You can also see that we don't have the bottom part of the frame, so it just ends on the main frame. If I turn the bottom frame on, I'll just show that. Okay, so that's the bottom part, but we've got doors in this element, so I'm going to turn that bottom frame off. Click OK, and here you can see the screen, and make sure we're picking up the right hotspot to manipulate that screen. There. Yeah. So that's our retractable screen. Typically I think for this scenario we want the top. We can also set it to the external frame face, so now this will pop out onto the face of the frame and expand to the extremities. Okay, so now you can see how that's positioned, and we can also position it relative to the wall. And you can see once again it expands to encompass the right size. So that is our new screen element. Pretty excited about that one. I know it's a very simple sort of thing, but just adding those extra components is a great functionality to have. The final update is basically the interface. So what we've done is we've created a new page on the interface at the beginning called components. On this page you basically have access to every function within this tool via these convenient menus. So we have the catalogs where you nominate how you connect to the catalogs. We have our assembly component, which is a combination of all the components below, and then we have our sub menus for every single component within the tool. Now we've also created what we call our designer menu. So this is this little icon here, and if I click on this it'll basically filter this menu into the base elements of the tool. So if I click that, we now only see the design and the openings menu, and we only see certain aspects within those menus. So we can control the shape and size, obviously that is a main function we need to control. Panel arrangement, we're always going to want to control the panel arrangement. And then you've got the frame and the mullion size. So you've got a little bit of control over the detail there. Then you've got the opening. So size, panel arrangement, and the openings. I think that's basically the three main functions of the tool that you want to control on a daily basis. Every user, average user, intermediate, beginner, even up to the advanced user. So this menu basically will filter the interface for you and make navigation a lot easier. Within the openings you only have access to the door panel style, so you don't have access to any of the finer details, subframes, handles and view panels and all that sort of thing, you have access to the operable element type and the panel style. So that gives you basically everything you need for your daily processes. Now, you may have also noticed a couple other icons up here. This is a refresh model that we've always had when you're changing between configurations in your catalogs that are vastly different. The model needs a couple steps to process all the data. So occasionally you need to hit that refresh button to get the model to generate completely. There is also this eye icon, so it's closed at the moment because it's hiding menus, and that's a factor of the designer menu. So if I turn the designer menu off, we can then show menus. So that just makes all our menus appear. None of them disappear when we go into other menus, so we always see where we are in the hierarchy of the tool. However, this limits our interface real estate, and in some components it can be quite cluttered. So we also have the ability to hide the menus, and that basically reduces all the menus above so that we can see the element clearly. Okay, and that is all for this feature release. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you look forward to using these enhancements and playing around with more flexible panel shapes. And please let us know in the comments below what you think of these new features and the tool in general. If you have any criticisms, we'd be glad to address them. Of course, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, please consider sharing this content with other ArchiCAD users on other platforms. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.